and welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. This episode, we are continuing our discussion on Ándale, Prieta by Yasmin Ramírez. In this episode, we will be discussing part 2 of her memoir, Finding Yasmin.
Hey, we found Yasmin. Did we find her in this part?
Did we find Ita in part 1?
That's a good question, actually. It's a good reflect. Did we? I don't think we ended the episode asking that.
No, and I wanted to end this episode asking that, but you guys...
I feel like we did
jump
find
right in.
Ita.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We learned about her relationships, her hardships.
Finding Ita was really different than finding Yasmin. It almost seemed like, well, Ita was more sure of herself, older, like this force, you know? Mm-hmm. And Yasmin was growing up, seeing that and going through her adolescence. I know, Vanessa, you have some things you want to say about teenage Yasmin, but that's, you know, a whole other kind of identity crisis. Right? Wow. So a different kind of searching for letting go of things, dealing with things. But yeah, I was really interested in the fact that both sections were finding, you know, finding themselves and then finding each other by the end of the book.
Yeah, I might have touched on this the first part 1, but I feel like there are cinematic aspirations here. You know, I think the way... Also, I mean, just Yasmin writing, creative writing background, being very descriptive and vivid in the details. The use of, like, soundtrack. I'm like, I could see this... The adaptation, you know, but, you know, instead it's called Finding Ita or Finding Yasmin, you know, like the subtitles. I could see it there on the screen popping up right there. Yeah. Paso text, you know, like the car is rolling up and got the music blasting and it starts off with the staircase.
I kind of love that.
Yes, but so we have a young, angsty teenage Yasmin, right?
Yes.
And we've all been there. I think, just very, very informally, right before we recorded, we were reminiscing on ours. Yours is more recent. You're
some of us are still there.
I'm kind of still in the middle of it.
Still trying to find out my way out of it, kind of.
Yeah. Was there anything particularly about teenage Yasmin? I, with cariño, call her angsty Yasmin. That like stood out to you, or that resonated with you?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we did a lot of the same things around that age. I didn't go to summer school. I might have needed to. I would skip class, hang out with the guys and stuff.
Nice.
Same kind of music, I guess. I listened to a lot of Nirvana when I was in high school.
Required listening.
Yeah. So I kind of related and connected to her with that. I want to say it was like the early 20 chapters. Like,
yeah.
I want to say around there. Yeah. It was just kind of like I was able to see myself kind of like growing up in El Paso, kind of doing the same things that she was doing. I
mean, graduating, throwing the middle finger and riding off into the sunset to be better. I think a lot of people growing up have that vision, that dream.
Yeah. Can't wait to get out.
It's a typical thing, though.
Yeah. I think that's something else that I really liked about the second part is some of the chapters kind of start out with, like, I had a plan. This was my plan. And then she's like, but that didn't really happen. So I really liked that about some of those chapters that did that.
Yeah, but life didn't work out that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was really cool, too. I'm just showing her vulnerability, but also, like you said, Vanessa, that sometimes things don't go according to plan. And with memoir, it's so important to be honest because even if you're putting in a little bit of fiction there, like the reader's going to know, even though it's your story.
Yeah.
I feel like we can sense like, this doesn't seem like it could really happen. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it going back to what you were saying about like certain things that we kind of all did growing up, or that we were focusing on so much at that age, with our
Boys.
identities. Yeah, boys and like trying to be cool, but more specifically how we looked, you know? So there were a lot of those
Going
chapters.
into your individuality, like trying to find who
like
you
how
are.
to dress and how to act, and the hair has to be perfect, the makeup has to be perfect, you know? I feel like even more so now. I would hate to have been a teenager like in 2022, because like I would have gone crazy. But there's always been pressure, right? But,
Yeah.
so, you know, that whole just wanting to fit in. So a lot of it had to do with finding her identity, who she was, to her family. Here we get a little more about her relationship with her father, her complicated relationship with her father, and wanting to belong in that realm too. And not feeling like she did in either one.
Yeah.
Or struggling with it. Not to say that she wasn't fitting in, but just struggling with it.
And also just, I think, again, through the voice of the narrative, this idea of narrative where it's the author reflecting back on this, you know, understanding that it's a lot more than just typical teenage angst. It's also just because of this situation of her father and being absent and having another family and having to like work with this, that also being an aspect, right?
Yeah.
To how she's feeling without maybe not even realizing it at that time.
Yeah.
Well, I guess as she calls it, I forget what chapter, the emotional scars.
Which is a nice mirror to like
Eat
that scars,
Yeah.
physical scars, and her own emotional scars, right? But
True.
I did notice somewhere in those early, like chapter 21 or something like that, she's still using or referencing songs and music, but she's not breaking the fourth wall as often.
All right, because we did bring that up in part one.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you had any ideas as to why she might still be talking about, like, I don't know, there were a couple of songs like Outkast or something like was on the radio, or like Madonna, but she doesn't say find this song or listen to this song, you know.
Yeah. Well, one, I mean, I was talking about the whole cinematic thing. Like, that reminds me of just like any TV show. If it's a flashback, they're gonna play songs to let you know. Oh, by the way, this is the '90s, so we're gonna play this song. You know, Outkast. So, you know, it definitely places it, and it's something most songs we remember. Like, oh yeah, kind of places there. But compared to that technique, right, of speaking to us. No, it's not as present. I don't know if you remember if she mentioned the book release so that some of these are like just essays that she had written kind of on their own and then put them together.
I feel like she did mention that. Yeah.
So it's, you know, maybe that's kind of one of the things
True.
that happened there.
I thought it might have been purposeful. In the first section, and I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of the songs that she asks us to pause and listen to might not be as well known. That could be one thing, but also they're tied to these really beautiful memories with her Ita. And then I think in Finding Yasmin in part 2, they're kind of just an aside. Like, we were listening to this music, or it wasn't really something that was necessary for the telling of the story. And in part 1, it almost seems like we need to hear the song and visualize Ita in her bathroom or something. I don't know. At least that's how I separated the two, but
I like
I
that.
don't know. I could be.
I do like it though, because it is forcing you. It is forcing you to slow it down. Slow down, like maybe the reading momentum. So they're functionally different in there. Also, keep in mind that she's also Yasmin's very playful here, with maybe things like that technique. And there's a couple moments where she plays around with the way the words fall on the page. You know, oftentimes I think the iconic thing is the voices traveling up the stairs, and that's how it's represented on the page. So things like that. So it's just another example of her playfulness in narrative.
And then those couple of chapters also where she's listing all the things in the storage unit that are kind of spliced throughout. Like they're it's a whole list of things, but she's just, you know, kind of throwing them in between these paragraphs of her and her mom and her sister kind of deciding what they're going to do with all of these things. And I thought that was really cool. I do see that later, though, in the book, only in the Finding Yasmin part. Did you guys see any of that, more of the, like Richie calls it, playful writing in Finding Ita?
In Finding Ita?
Yeah, in any of those first, 15, 14 chapters. I don't know if that's also attributed to what you were saying earlier, Richie, about the placing of these essays and stuff, or, and again, I might be reaching, but, or maybe in the Finding Yasmin, and she's, you know, now we know her background, she has an MFA, and so her playfulness here is directly linked to finding herself as a writer and being able to play around with these genres a little bit more. It might be a good question to ask.
And absolutely. I would also say that's something that kind of makes this also kind of could be really potentially fun to teach in the classroom, using some of these aspects as writing prompts for students.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
For example, you know, I know one of the ultimate biggest supporters of a lot of the local literary world is Eddie Groove Acosta. He's currently at Jeff, but he's always invited a lot of us to go speak with his students and you know, talk about writing, and you know, I'm pretty sure he'll see if he can get this book into his students' hands. So, and I'm pretty sure they'll be writing prompts too, based around aspects of the book too. You know, like working with memory and, you know, straight out of her pages.
Is he full time there, or does he adjunct for us?
I don't think he adjuncts.
Okay, I had some ideas, but maybe we can talk about that after the show.
For sure. That's the podcast premium members get to listen in on those conversations.
Yes.
The secret ones.
Yeah.
What else do we want to say about the teenage years? Is there anything else? How did you guys feel about bringing up her father and those memories she had of being stood up by him and those kind of weird interactions? There's some alluding to that earlier in the book, and then there's like a few chapters or a few, here where we get a little bit more of that, and then it kind of dissipates again.
I mean, I think this is definitely something that, as she's as the author also working out, right? Going back into memory and realizing that it was such a source of pain, you know, again, talking about those emotional scars of trying to figure out, you know.
Yeah, it's like all these things are happening, these changes, and she's wanting to find herself. She thinks, well, he's a huge part of my identity and I'm trying to connect with him. And so I think that's what makes it even more heartbreaking, just being so young and not having the father figure that she hoped to have.
Yeah.
And very vivid memories of sitting outside, waiting, that disappointment, that hope. And her mom just kind of like, well, I can't do anything about it. That's her dad, But yeah, it was they're pretty painful chapters.
Yeah.
But I think necessary, and I can see why she obviously wanted to include them here, but she kept them pretty short, and she didn't really go into it too much. She's like, at some point she says, I didn't really know who he was, and he, as much as she tried, she couldn't forget those painful memories, and he had his chance to be my dad. He missed his chance to be my dad. It's on page 165. So lots of these moments where she's kind of just like coming to terms with this is how our relationship's going to be, right? And it isn't because she didn't try. And then that was it. And then we, see all these other aspects that end up shaping her in a positive way. So I think we don't have any need to read more about him or learn more about him. So I think in some cases people might be like, well, readers might think, why not include more here? Why not have throughout? But I think it was just the right amount, right? Like what was necessary to know about that relationship. Obviously, the people who were most important in her shaping are here, and it's the women in her life, mostly, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's also maybe, again, jumping ahead, but talking about the subtitle Love Letter to My Family, it's also her figuring out, well, what does this family mean? Who is part of that? Who was there for me? Right? Because a love letter, is looking back here, right? And maybe not realizing it until you've written this, like, oh yeah, these people were always here. A huge part of this, even if I wasn't there.
Or
some of it.
Animals, like Drew, right? Drew was there for
Drew.
20 years. Drew was family also. Yeah. So not necessarily just human beings.
No, that's a great point. I mean, that's also it. Yeah. Like, who do we consider family? Like, a lot of people are like nothing, the pets are just like beautiful, amazing creatures that make your life better, with their innocence, their love, complete love for you. So yeah, it's a huge, yes.
Yeah.
Great point. I miss my cat.
Oh.
Aw.
Sorry.
Our furry friends. Or our scaly friends, Whatever.
Scaly friends. I was going to say something else, but that was going to come out wrong.
Feathery friends?
So...
That's the one I was thinking of. What's the...
No, because we're going to have to edit it out.
Well, we're already talking extraneously. So.
I know. No, I think that's the only other thing I had to say about these, this time in her life. Because I think after this is when she talks about Dallas. And then coming back.
Yeah.
So
feeling disconnected. I've never lived prolonged outside of the city, so can't relate a whole lot there.
Yeah.
But even just traveling, I guess I could see like being away, like all of a sudden the way you are here is kind of transformed elsewhere. like the way people speak Spanish somewhere else, or your expectations, or so on.
Mm-hmm.
And then
How
just
you
missing it.
speak Spanish other places or English other places, right? We can't hear our accents most of the time, but when we travel outside, we're like, where are you from?
Which blows my mind. Like, what? What are you hearing? I don't get it. I start freaking out.
We all sound like this.
I know, it's kind of
I don't know. It sounds normal. You have the accent. What are you talking about?
Yeah, she has a lot of, anecdotes about that, and kind of being asked where she's from and what part of Mexico, why does she speak English so well.
It's always one of the most messed up things, like, to tell anyone. Like, what the hell?
I know,
Anybody-
so condescending.
Why do you not? First of all.
I do like, there's a lot here that is relatable, especially the loss of the language, the loss of Spanish, and kind of leaning more towards like that pocha side, which I'm very guilty of too, having, lost a lot of the Spanish that I grew up with just because I don't practice it every day.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this
Yeah.
before and with other books, but
Yeah, no, it's very common. I mean, I was talking about this the other day with Cassie in her chapbook. It's just border Spanish is borderline Spanglish, and just
Yeah.
trying to throw in what we can when we can.
and that's okay too. It's okay to be pocha. It's okay to
Exactly.
speak two languages and for them to coexist and not. I don't know. I feel like there was a lot of guilt always associated with like, well,
It does happen.
You're not pronouncing it right, or
And that's one of the things too, right? Like getting it from both sides. I'm not American enough for the Americans. I'm not Mexican enough for the Mexicans. It's tiring. Okay. Okay.
ni de
Almost.
aquí ni de allá,
Yeah.
But that's a whole other thing.
And to kind of go with your theme of like it's okay. That's kind of what's happening here. I think a lot with this second part, and just reflecting on who she's becoming, who she's been, where she's going. And I think you also said it, like she does start a lot of these chapters with "I had a plan."
Yeah.
Right. And so to young readers here, I think it's okay to know that you may have a plan and it will not go that way, but you can still kind of end up where you're supposed to be. Yasmin here as a writer, as a professor. So she's gone through a journey through working retail, getting to various educational pursuits to, becoming a writer. So that's something you might have a plan. It might fall through, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, it is okay. Stuff happens. We can't plan everything, right? No matter how much of like control freaks we are. I know that's, in my case, I stress myself out way too much. Like, gotta do this, and then so many things happen and it doesn't even end up that way. And it's totally fine. I'm still here.
And 90% of it's like out of your control.
But yeah, we're still trying to control all of it.
Cue
How does
Avengers
that
theme.
make sense? I know.
Sorry.
Make it make
Another
sense.
inside joke. Back on the inside
Make
jokes.
it make sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and she, I think had these expectations for what Dallas was going to be like and moving away was going to be like, and it kind of was that way for a while, and then she lost sight of some things. She found some other things. She learned a lot in the process. But she missed her family. She missed the death of her grandmother. And it was kind of like an awakening, right? Like, okay, I got to do something. I'm not happy here anymore. And that's okay too, right? Like deciding you want to do something and then 6 months later, a year later, realizing okay, I don't want to do this anymore. That's okay. You can go back on that decision that you made, right? So I think that's what happened with her, even though it was a while and she was in Dallas for a bit. I think she came back for the funeral. She hadn't been back in 2 years, and then she comes back fully back home after 10 years, right? So that's a pretty big gap. And talking about, you know, the changes and how she saw her city differently, how she remembered it differently, which we've also talked about, right? Like the power of memory, but also like how fragile it can be, and how sometimes broken these memories can be.
I think she also describes it as like kind of like fuzzy at one point. I'll try to find it. Oh, I think it's when she's talking about her dad and the last time that she saw him. On page 156. The two memories of the visits are shrouded in a haze, as if I'm not really there, as if I dreamt it, but I'm watching myself there at the same time. I know I spent several hours with him, but I only have 2 short, distinct memories. The images that tear through the cloud are flashes of shopping at a small market with my dad and having dinner with him, my half-sister, and her family.
Shrouded in a haze. Yeah. I think that captures it really well. A lot of these memories, right? But then a lot of them are also like very vivid and precise. So I think it's telling why these are hazy, right? Maybe subconsciously she doesn't want to remember those because they're not good memories. But the ones with Ita, like, we can visualize, we can see.
I think also, like, with the memories with Ita, they're like repeated things that they would do together. So I think that also kind of makes them a little bit stronger.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that in the other episode, first episode, months ago. Just kidding.
The other episode.
No, like how it was, they were rituals that they had, right? And so those tend to stick with you through repetition and stuff. So yeah, that's a really good point. Do you guys want to talk about when she finds out about Ita's death and then comes back? Like chapters 28, 29. I think at this point, we alluded to this earlier, but at this point she's starting to feel guilty for having decided to move away and like live her life. Even though her Ita wasn't judging her for it, you know, and nobody was.
Yeah.
But she felt that because of their closeness and she's away and she happened to die while she was gone, you know, no one's going to take that guilt away from you, right?
Yeah, it's always a rough thing.
So I think this is where like the dreams start, and she just like everything's making her, you know, emotional, talking about her, remembering those beautiful memories. So it's kind of you know, this depiction of how she's grieving Ita is one that I think, you know, is really relatable to, going back to like what we can relate to in these chapters. Trying like just wrestling with missing your Ita, and then also like beating yourself up for not being around, and you know, how do I get over this? How do I remember my Ita? And I think in Yasmin's case, she had to write about her, right? She had to keep her alive, or she wanted to keep her alive in these chapters, which is what we see towards the end, or by the end of the book, when her mom tells her, you know, you just have to finish that book. You have to finish writing about your Ita. You can't carry her forever. And, you know, you can't carry her forever is one of those phrases that really stuck with her. It stuck with me too. after reading this. Like, yeah, it's true. You think you're doing good by holding on to these memories, but sometimes they're just too painful. Maybe you have to release them in other outlets, like this memoir for Yasmin.
Yeah. And also remembering her through food and memory, her recipes, you know, that kind of draws.
And music. Yeah.
And smells, I think. Yeah. Just everything.
Feast of the senses.
Yeah. I like that she did include a couple of her recipes at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's my favorite kind of recipe where it's the recipe, but it also has like other elements in there.
Yeah, it's like a narrative recipe, and I think I had mentioned to Yasmin about Denise Chavez's A Taco Testimony, which is one of my favorite books. But she has, she does this in her book as well. She has recipes and then interjected by stories and poetry and lots of cool stuff. And I know that Yasmin does have her students do similar assignments in her classes, because I was reviewing some for the Basil's journal. So I did see a lot of these, and they were very, very cool. So that could be something, you know, for instructors to think about, like, because everyone has a family recipe or a favorite dish, right? And there's almost always a memory tied to it.
Yeah, I mean, food is culture. I mean, she talks about taking that class with Dr. Meredith Abarca. I had taken class. I don't know if you guys had ever taken a class with her.
I took one with her.
With the food, was it food related? Food themed?
Yes and no.
That's like her expertise. So even if it wasn't, she probably included it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was women in literature that I took with her.
All right.
But it's where I read like Water for Chocolate and Fried Green Tomatoes.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
so
I really
very
enjoyed that.
food heavy. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. So I mean, you see where, I mean, she speaks in here how important that taking that class was, to see how you can write about food in such a profound way.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes we don't recognize it. It's a part of our everyday lives, but that's what culture is.
Yeah. I think we've kind of talked about it like throughout, like all of the books we've read. Where like they mentioned food here.
And now I'm gonna read Mexican Heaven by Jose Olivares. Tacos, cosita. It's my favorite one.
Yeah.
That's funny.
What's your guys' food memory? If you were to write a little recipe there,
Gosh, there's so many.
I know.
Just one?
flip
he
the
said?
script. True. I mean, maybe if you were to like share one that would also be part of your family story.
I think my dad always does, like whenever we have like a cookout, like we'll do like steaks or whatever. If we have beans, he always makes like little tacos of beans and cheese and chorizo. And he does them on the grill. They're nice and crispy. They're super good. And his dad used to always do them like when they used to have cookouts too. So maybe that one. I feel like that's a good one.
Have you made any tribute ones yet?
I haven't, but I always happily eat them.
I feel like you would at some point.
I have to, right?
You know, yeah, it's just like
Keep it
riding a bike.
Except for it's not.
Back with the inside jokes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, I have great memories of early being young and making tamales with extended family at my grandmother's house. And
Yeah.
that was a pretty cool way to bring us together.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And after my grandmother died, we hadn't really done it, you know. But we had tried intentionally for that reason, to get the family together. And so, yeah, making tamales for sure. then getting more experimental, like how can we make these modern? And just kidding. Not really, but there's so many different ways you can make tamales.
There
so.
are, but the OG ones
can't mess
are
with
the best.
The red, the green.
And the rajas con queso.
Yes, so we had never really made those. So that's what, like for us, that's experimental. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah,
those were awesome.
My mom, when we would make them, it would just be the red and green, and then every now and then she would make tamales de dulce, but no one really ate those.
Yeah, we never made those.
So she was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna make red and green.
I remember biting into one of those, like, what the hell is this? A sweet tamale? A sweet tamale? Damn.
I know, and then now they have all sorts of tamales. The rajas one, like, those are probably my favorite now. Anyway, now I'm hungry.
I know, me too.
Yeah. I mean, as always,
As
like,
usual.
I'm curious if you guys are listening, what you guys would write about.
Ooh, yes. Let's make a poll.
We should do that.
Yeah, we can do something similar to the recipes. Like what recipe, family recipe or family dish best captures your family's legacy. I don't know. That's too loaded.
And I know all these different questions. And she's like, and what did you think about that one movie?
I know. I'm
if
rusty,
you were held
okay?
at gunpoint and forced to make something perfectly, what would it be?
That captures the essence of your family, but also brings back childhood memories. And is also culturally... No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that we end the book with the recipes. Because I think that perfectly captures this love letter, right, to her family. And how she's keeping it alive. Through food and all this stuff. So
Now a book. Now a memoir.
And now a memoir.
Oh, that's great. I mean, definitely if you guys are listening to this and you're living in the El Paso area, I think it'll be worth it to pick it up at any of the local bookstores that carry it, order it online. There's a lot of El Paso in this, and I think you'd appreciate it. Find different connections that maybe we may not have made. But let her know. Local authors. Now, if you're listening and you're not in El Paso, you should still order it. So you could get a good sense of like border area life, you know? It's captures pretty well.
And if you have any questions for Yasmin, we're going to try to get her to do an interview with us.
In 3 months.
She's so... No.
I'm kidding.
She's so busy, and she's going to be even busier once the fall semester starts.
Starting.
Which is like in a couple weeks. So, yeah.
So we'll interview her soon.
Maybe it'll be a food podcast.
I know. Can we please do
mean...
we just need a stove.
I'll bust out with the camera. So what we could do, like a burner. Well,
do we have a burner? Do we have one?
Like a hot plate?
We have one?
I mean, they're like cheap.
We can do something out there before.
Bring
and
a stove.
Maybe. I have a
Just
portable
bring, like,
camping
a
stove.
George Foreman grill.
Would be kind of cool, yeah.
Do they still make those?
Let's just go camping.
I'm sure.
Just go.
Anyway, now we're just making
Camping.
plans on the podcast.
And Yasmin has no idea, but she's going to be part of.
She'll be so excited. She's like, food? Yes.
By the time she hears this, it probably will already have happened.
Yeah.
I know, that's true. No.
Oh, no, we're going to catch up on episodes.
Yes, we're
If you're
gonna
listening to
catch
this,
up.
it doesn't matter because you're listening to them, so this is more off script, actually, so I'll edit this out. Haha.
Okay.
We need to get a new editor.
No final thoughts
Fire the current one.
Me.
on the
Oh.
book.
Actually,
Maybe.
that would be helpful, but
We're figuring it out. The plans are changing.
but we're still recording.
The plans are changing.
They're
Anyway.
changing. Like, this is premium content.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Literally Literary, recorded at Power at the Pass and brought to you by Border Census. This episode, we continued our discussion on Ándale, Prieta by Yasmin Ramírez. If you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Join us on our next episode and follow us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep and on Twitter at literallylitep.